Plenty action on Saturday in the Premier League. Want to talk about Manchester United against Crystal Palace. Janusz, Michallik and Rob Dawson with us. Going to start at Old Trafford where Rob is. How does a team that beat Crystal Palace 3-0 just a few days ago in the League Cup then lose 1-0 at home to Crystal Palace today, Rob?
Probably just a sign of where United are at the moment. It's probably important to point out that Palace rested a few players in midweek. They had their full or their fullish team back out at Old Trafford today, and United just aren't consistent enough to start stringing these results together. It's a fourth league defeat now, their worst start to a league campaign for 34 years, and you can't really say that they deserve to win today. You know, Palace are hanging on at the end. They scored in the first half and hanging on a little bit at the end. But Sam Johnson in the Palace goal hasn't made a load of incredible saves. It's just another one of those days where United have been very, very underwhelming. And the United fans who are streaming out the stadium around me now won't be going home thinking that United did enough to deserve to win. Definitely not.
I'll let the viewers into a bit of a secret. You said you might not be on until 5 minutes after full time, and we're pretty much recording on the full-time whistle because you expected it to be noisy with music and fans singing and dancing and celebrating, but it doesn't appear that there's much of an atmosphere both during the game, and the fans were pretty quick to leave, a bit like Marcus Rashford, who was replaced 13 minutes from time for Christian Eriksen.
If you can hear any noise, that's the Palace fans to my right-hand side dancing and jigging about because they played fantastically well. And you're right, you know, the energy in the stadium drains away very, very quickly when United don't do enough to trigger it. You know, they've had chances at the end of the game. You know, on another day, possibly they get an equaliser. But again, it's not a day where United can feel hard done by. They just haven't done enough to win the game. And you're right to mention Marcus Rashford. It summed up Marcus Rashford's afternoon perfectly that, you know, midway through the second half, United are desperate for a goal. And Ten Hag decides to take Marcus Rashford off. That's just, again, that's where his form is at the moment. You know, United need their goal scorers on when they're desperate for goals. And Marcus Rashford just isn't delivering at the moment. And that's why he went off. There are massive problems at Man United at the moment.
Yeah. Janusz, what was the biggest takeaway for you from this game and this result?
Yeah, you teed me up a little bit on Marcus Rashford, and I'll get back to it in a second because just overall, I mean, it feels like every time I watch United, it's complete randomness. I don't know. Rob, I don't know if you get that, right? Because, I mean, we've been a big supporters of Ten Hag and what he's done last season. We've given him full credit. I fully believe that it's the sort of persona that team needed, right? And we don't want to get back to former managers, but that's what was needed. They accomplished everything they could have possibly accomplished pretty much, other than losing to City in the final of the FA Cup. But starting here, okay, losing players, but just the lack of inconsistency to me, it's absolutely incredible. And especially when United struggle, you see in those games that they lose or draw, you see, you know, we talk about lack of identity, and sometimes it's hard to put a finger on it, but that's what it is. It's just, it doesn't seem that there are patterns of play to get the best players in the best positions. And coming back to Rashford, I agree with you that I would have kept him on regardless of how he played. He wasn't great. He wasn't absolutely horrible. But I think, you know, that plan is kind of, I saw it in the first half, Rob, and you were there closer, so I really want you to answer that. Because there's complete lack of wide play, and you know, every team, but United in particular, I think Rashford's better when he has obviously a Luke Shaw out there, right? Because he's easy to mark out of the game in that wide position when you don't have anybody overlapping. And by the way, it's not that the Law did a better job on the right hand side necessarily. Obviously, he was better than Amrabat, that's not his position. So you do look on the left hand side. Obviously, no Luke Shaw, Reguilon, who came in. He was out already. Malacia, we all know about that. And I think that's when Rashford suffers because as a fullback, and I was one, when you know you only have to deal with one player, it's a lot easier than the fact that Rashford sometimes comes in because Luke Shaw or somebody else, a true fullback, gets up there. So you have to have a plan for that. And I just continually see almost as if Ten Hag couldn't manage the game within. That's maybe one issue I have with him.
So what's the biggest story here, Rob? I mean, we've spoken a bit about Rashford, and Janusz has mentioned not having Luke Shaw behind, but does that mask bigger issues at the football club? Because before Haaland was available, when he was still injured, Rashford played through the middle. People were saying, okay, once Rashford goes back to the left, everything will be fine again. Rashford's back on the left-hand side now, and it's made absolutely no difference. So what's the biggest issue right now for Manchester United?
That's the golden question. I think you can give reasons. You don't want to make excuses, but you can give reasons for the other league defeats that they've had this season. They were beaten by Tottenham, and Tottenham are revitalised under Postecoglou. They played Brighton, and they're a very well coached team, and Brighton got the better of them. Arsenal are title contenders. This really, out of all the defeats that they've had this season, this is the biggest red flag result that United have had so far this season. There are problems. There are players missing. Luke Shaw's missing. Alessandro Martinez is missing. But United had a team out there today that was good enough to beat Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace don't win away from home very often. Today was their first goal in the first half all season. This isn't a team that came here particularly expecting to win. United had to win this game. This was meant to be a portion of the season where United could start to turn around their results. You could argue that they've had a relatively difficult start to the season, but they've got a run of home games now, and Palace represented a real chance to start putting a run together. They beat Burnley last weekend. They beat Palace in the week. Today was a real chance for them to string 3 results together and start moving forward, and they haven't done it. It's fair enough to start talking about Rashford not really firing, or Højlund feeling the pressure of being the central striker at 20 years old, or they've got problems defensively with injuries. Really, there has to come a point where you cannot make excuses now for this Man United team. There's absolutely no excuse at all for Man United losing this game today. They had to win, and they haven't. And the danger is that is a symbol of what this season is going to look like now. That it's going to be a season of poor results, followed by a couple of good ones, followed by a run of poor ones, and they're going to be scrapping again to try and get into the top 4. That's just not where Man United fans thought this team would be this season.
And Rob, just to add to that, I think the issue with that, players being, players missing and all that, I get that everybody has it. And to some, I think it's a bigger excuse than to others. But in case of Manchester United, I think that leaders have to lead. Because I look at Bruno Fernandes, I think he's less influential than I've seen him, this season so far. It got a little bit better in the second half, right? I mean, if you look at statistically at Bruno, it looked better. But in the first half, I didn't see him lead. I don't see Casemiro lead the way he does. Now, you can look at the other games and see some goals here and there. But overall, in these particular matches where you need to get that result, because this is it. The one midweek, you didn't have to. I mean, we've talked about Crystal Palace resting in a League Cup, where you think that that's going to be more important to them than Premier League, actually, because they'll stay up, and that's one of the only trophy that perhaps they can win. But fair play. I just don't see it. Don't see Casemiro. Don't see Bruno Fernandes. Mason Mount was actually quite good, I thought. Maybe what's missing is that final key pass. When I talk about Bruno Fernandes or Mason Mount, but that to me, I look at Varane. I expected a lot more from him. Lindelof. I mean, you can say all you want about Lindelof, but he's an experienced player, right? I mean, the way that goal was scored, he lost Anderson on that one, and I don't expect that to happen. I don't care what you think about Lindelof. If he's great, good, better, or different. I mean, he's an experienced player. He can't afford to be out-muscled for a goal like this. So that is an issue, perhaps. And even throw in Rashford in there. I mean, he's young, relatively speaking, but I mean, he's English international. Those 3 or 4 players, I think, have got to carry the rest of the team. As you said, this wasn't a bad team, even though they were still missing a lot of players.
Final question, Rob. Galatasaray in midweek in the Champions League. The fans that show up, will they be a little less patient than usual given this result?
It's reaching that point. I mean, at full time today, there were scattered boos, which you'd probably expect after a poor performance and another defeat at Old Trafford. Ten Hag walked off down the tunnel. The fans around the tunnel applauded him. So, in general, the fans are still behind Ten Hag. I think they believe that the problems at this club extend beyond the manager. The problem is at the moment is that United fans will see banana skins everywhere now. Games against Galatasaray, home games in the Champions League, games that United would expect to win. They'll turn up at Old Trafford nervous and with every right to do so. They've got Brentford, at Old Trafford next Saturday, a game again that United should be winning. But they're going to turn up at Old Trafford nervous again because they're going to be worried about results like this. And that's one of the things that didn't happen last season. They put a big, long winning run together at Old Trafford, and they turned up at Old Trafford expecting to win. And that, in the space of a couple of weeks to start the season, has disappeared. It just looks, the fan base is lack confidence, that the team look like they're lacking confidence. there are big issues at United at the moment, and it's only going to be solved by results on the field. The problem is that if you judge it on performances like today against Crystal Palace, they just aren't capable of stringing runs and wins together.
Normally you get a bing bong like that when there's a steward's inquiry at a racehorse. I don't think it's the same at Old Trafford, but something has to happen because there's a lot of problems, as Janusz and Rob have mentioned today. Identifying them is easy. Finding a solution is not as easy. Full time at Old Trafford. Manchester United 0, Crystal Palace 1.